I am, if I can get to the first page, I am working on the Jolly Bar Quilt Along, sponsored by the Fat Quarter Shop. Of course, the book is in the link in my bio. We are on block number 4. So this is a quilt along that is scheduled to take place every other week. We started in August and we will go clear through December with this one. So we are working on one block every 2 weeks. So there is still time for folks to join in the fun for the quilt along. So this book here has, as it says down here at the bottom, 20 Jolly Bar quilts that you could make. So of the 20 Jolly Bar quilts you can make, understand that even though it says you can use Jolly Bars for them, you could absolutely use yardage if you like, and in some cases even scraps. So you just have to have the scraps that are big enough and be a little strategic with how you do it, just to make sure that everything matches, but you could absolutely do this with scraps. So there are 20 different blocks, if you will, in this book. So the great thing is that I can learn how to do all 20 of these blocks. Each one of those blocks is repeated over and over and over again to create what would look like a scrappy quilt. So you can see how I've already identified next to each one the date for when these blocks will be made. We are not making the whole quilt, we are just making a block. It creates a sampler. There are some that I may say after all this work that I did, you know what, I would love this as a quilt. And I can go back and make any one of these using all of the blocks into a quilt. So if you're interested in getting the Jolly Bar book 5, as I go back to the front page again, this is the book. The link is in my bio for you to get this particular book. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in everyone. Hopefully everybody's having a good evening. This block is relatively simple and easy to put together, so we should be here for not a long period of time today. So I will talk about the book a little bit more throughout, but again, this is sponsored by, down here in the bottom, the Fat Quarter Shop, and this book is only 10, and so with it only being 10, it is absolutely enough. A 2.5 junior? Not sure what question you're asking, twin. So this book for 10, you get 20 quilts, so it's like 50 cents a quilt, 50 cents a pattern. So that's a pretty good deal for this. Oh, jelly roll. So this is not a jelly roll, this is jelly bar. This is a Jolly Bar. And so a Jolly Bar is a piece of fabric that all the pre-cuts that are 5 inches by 10 inches. So Jolly Bars are exclusive to Fat Quarter Shop. And so you can also find those on the website as well. But again, you're not limited to the Jolly Bars. You can also use yardage. So the whole purpose is that if you ever are gifted a Jolly Bar, or if you ever decide to buy Jolly Bars, you would have patterns that go along with those Jolly Bars. So these are Jolly Bars. Again, a jelly roll is 2.5 inches by the width of the fabric. Usually that's about maybe 40 inches wide. So it's a long strip. For a Jolly Bar, Jolly Bars are, if you will, half of a layer cake. Layer cakes are 10 inches square. Jolly Bars are 5 by 10. Not a problem. However, I will say Fat Quarter Shop does have a lot of free patterns on their website for jelly rolls if you're interested in going onto their website to look for those, as well as they do sell jelly rolls. So they sell a lot of pre-cuts, jelly rolls, jelly bars, charm packs, layer cakes. They do have all of those. You can get them from their site. Again, if you need the link is in my bio. Today we are working on, and I'm trying to be mindful of not showing everything because of course this is a paid book, and so we don't want to share everything when things have to be paid for. So this is the block right here that we are working on today, and so this block is called Refractions, and you can see up here in this corner, like, this is part of the quilt, and that's what the Refractions quilt would look like if I just repeated the same block for a total of 9 times. So I would just have the same block, and that's just the thinking of it. And you can see in this case they're all like similar colors, but it could be totally scrappy. Okay, so this is what we're working on. I have already everything pre-cut. So what I did do is I went ahead and I separated everything out ahead of time as I was prepping for this project. So I separated everything out, and then on the off weeks that I am not going live for this, I am at least posting a video of all of the things that I have prepped. The prepped sheet I will post tomorrow, so that's the official release date for that. So I will give you that information so you know how many of each you need. Of course, you need to have the book to have the measurements. So we need our squares and we need our background. All we're doing today is making half square triangles. That's it. And then we're going to put those half square triangles together. We're going to create a 4 patch and then another 4 patch, and it will be done. So let's get started with putting this together. Now, there was some pre-prep that I did do. Whenever you are making half square triangles, the biggest thing or the best thing with making them is to make them 2 by 2 if you can. Now, if you only need 1, then you can make them 1 at a time. But what happens is, this is the length and the width. This is the grain. Doesn't have as much stretch. When we do a half square triangle, we come along the bias and there is a lot of stretch. So it's easier to do it this way than it is to subcut everything. And then when you take it to the machine, you're pulling that diagonal a little bit more than you would like. On the back of every piece, I drew that diagonal. All I need to do is lay it flat, right sides together, and then I just take it to my machine and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides. The easiest way to do this for me is to go ahead and do everything at one time. This is called chain stitching because it will just make my life easier. So I'm just going on one side. I'm laying everything out. And I'm just going to keep sewing until all the blocks are done. You are not married to chain stitching. If you prefer to flip and do, flip and do, flip and do, you can absolutely do that. My preference is to just keep going in one direction and then flip them and then do everything else on the other side all at one time. But you could absolutely flip and cut, flip and cut, flip and cut if that's easier for you. So how is everyone doing this evening? It is Tuesday. We had the pleasure of being off today because today is Rosh Hashanah. And in Philly, we celebrate everybody. And of course, that meant going to work on Monday and then having Tuesday off. And then we will go back to work on Wednesday and work the rest of the week out. Hi, Charlie. How are you? So I'm just going through this whole thing. One right after the other. And again, just lining them up and creating one side of the half square triangle. As soon as I finish chain stitching the one side, I will go back and do the other side. In my mind, this should not take me that long to do because it seems like this should be relatively easy. This only should take me a little bit longer because I'm on live and I'm talking, answering questions. Thank you. I am fine. Thank you. And like demonstrating some things, which is the only reason why it should take me any length of time beyond possibly an hour. About, I would say without the cutting, I would say with cutting, it should have taken me no more than an hour. So this should not take me that long to do. But like I said, it'll take a little bit longer just because talking, watching the chat, answering questions, and demonstrating. Okay, so all of these are done. Everything is chained together. And I can cut them, or I can just go and do the other side. I just lift up and start on the other side by starting with the last one first. And I'm just going to go down the other side of that line. So I'm sewing on either side of the line that I drew a 1/4 inch. Oops. Okay. Try not to make comments about work, getting emails, and I'm like, why am I getting that email today? Hey, Alfred, how are you doing, Mr. Alfred? And again, these half square triangles will go very quickly because we're chain piecing them. And it's just one right after the other. And they got a little twisted up right here. Okay, got it. Thank you, thank you, thank you for tapping the screen. I appreciate you. Okay, and one more. I was saying to myself this today, I was off, and I said, oh, I should go to a fabric store. And then I said no, because my goal is to go to the Sewing and Quilting Expo this weekend in Virginia. And if I actually go through with it, I don't need to spend money at a fabric store and then spend money at the quilt show. So I said, oh, let me show some restraint. Okay. Let's see if there is a good side to show this on. And so if you can see, you can kind of sort of see those stitches. The line is here, and then you can see the stitches on either side. Okay. And it doesn't look any better on the back because then there's no line on the back, but it's just the lighting. Okay. My iron needs to be hot. Until we will let that heat up because we're going to do some cutting and pressing. Awesome. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. This is the Jolly Bar book. So we are doing the Jolly Bar Quilt Along, sponsored by the Fat Quarter Shop. As I cover that with my fingers, this book can be found in my bio. We are on the 4th block today. We still have 6 more to go. We are only doing a block every other week. So this quilt will not be finished until December. So usually I'm a little bit quicker, but of course I have 50 gazillion other projects to work on, so it's no problem to slow the pace for this one. The line I am using is called Denim and Daisies, and this is a Jolly Bar that I am using, and again, you can find that on the Fat Quarter Shop, and the link is also in my bio for this. It's like oranges and blues and whites. Okay, so I am just snipping the fabric, snipping the thread, I should say, and then I will go back and do the fabric, and I will show you the way that I do it and the way that you're supposed to do it. And you pick a team, whether it's team do it the right way, or if it's team this is how I do it. Hey, Mrs. Fuel, how are you doing, darling? I would have thought you would have been on already. Okay. So all of these are done. Take a straight edge using my ruler. Line this up with that center line, the one that I drew and stitched a 1/4 inch on either side, not on my seam line, and just cut. So it gives me 2 half square triangles. So this is the way that you are supposed to do it. It guarantees a straight cut every time. And as long as you can eyeball that line, you can get through these relatively quickly. Oops. Okay. Of course, you could do it my way, which is not to have to lift that up because there is a line there. And you could just do it yourself. Sometimes you may go a little crooked, which is why it's easier to use the straight edge than it is to use your judgment. So either way is fine, but yeah, this is the way you should do it. And just make sure that you are not cutting your seam, because if you cut your seam, you have to do it all over again. Okay, so everything is together. So now we need to press all these open. We could debate whether you press to the light or press to the dark. My thing is, eventually it's going to show through on the light side, so it doesn't matter. But traditionally we say press to the dark side. If you feel some kind of way, you could add a little bit of spray starch. And that just helps to make that seam layer a little bit flatter. Again, personal preference, whether you want to press them to the dark side or whether you want to press them open. You do not, it's up to you. I don't like the idea of just sitting there with my fingers and pressing them open. So if I don't have to, I won't. That's just me. Thank you for 1.9K. Thank you. Thank you for tapping the screen. Thank you for joining me for this evening as we are doing the Jolly Bar Quilt Along. We are making the quilt block called Refractions. So we are only working on 1 quilt block every 2 weeks. So it is a slow paced quilt along, which makes this, other than the fact that they're half square triangles, it really is an easier pattern. and it is an easier sew along because you're not stressed to get something done in a day, or to, you know, have a complicated block done every week. So the fact that you have 2 weeks to do this is plenty of time. And the great thing is that you get to watch me put it together, talk about the tips and the tricks, and then, you know, go the next day and put your block together and know that, you know, if I struggled, I'll show you where I struggled. And if, you know, I have any tips and tricks, you get to see those tips and tricks before you get started. And you have 2 weeks to also come into my inbox and say, hey, Jen, I need some help. And I will absolutely help you as well. So I feel like when I use starch, sometimes when I press it, and it depends on the fabric, depends on how hot your iron gets, and it depends on the day of the week. Sometimes I feel like it doesn't lay flat enough. And so because it doesn't lay flat enough, I'll add a little bit of starch. But again, in some cases, that's personal preference. Some people will pre-wash their fabric, and then they will starch it after they pre-wash it. With this, the white was pre-washable because that was yardage. The background fabric, the Jolly bars were pre-cuts, so we tend not to wash pre-cuts. There are some people that would feel like they need to, but if you wash a pre-cut, you might lose some of the, and it's not really even an inch, it's like maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so, because it'll fray for you in that washing machine. So we tend not to wash them. So then there are people who will sit there and they will starch every single pre-cut piece and iron them, and then that will be the only time they starch them. So it's really up to you. So the theory behind not starching it now, and why some people wouldn't starch it now, is because they feel like with the, depending on how much steam or starch or whatever you use, whoops, that didn't go straight. What will happen is it might shrink your fabric. And if it shrinks your fabric, it might take your measurements off a little bit. So most people will not starch them in advance like this, or will use, and in this case, like I use a dry iron. Some people will not use steam because the steam, is obviously the condensation will cause the fabric to possibly shrink. And then when you go to use the pieces, they may be 4 1/4 instead of 4 1/2. And that's going to, of course, mess up your measurements when you're sewing the units together. I really haven't had that problem. I personally feel like quilter's cotton doesn't shrink as much as some of the other cottons do. But like I said, I haven't had that problem in all the years that I've been doing it this way. Okay, we have one more. Now, whether you use a big iron or a craft iron, you will, for most projects, need an iron near you when you are creating quilts, because there's a lot of pressing to make sure everything lays nice and flat. Okay. Oh, here we go. So here comes the next fun part. Squaring these up. So again, we're using the Jolly Bar book. This is by the Fat Quarter Shop, and we are making refractions. And so that's what the block will look like. We're only making one of the blocks. So they'll give you the dimensions for the block. I have a square, And if I put my hand behind it, you can see those lines. So I love squares that have these lines in them on the diagonal, because I can use them with my half square triangles to square everything up and make sure that it's as even as possible. We are human. Humans, that makes us fallible. And so we do make mistakes, but it's going to help us to make least amount of mistakes as possible. And so I love that. So I'm going to line that up with the diagonal for the half square triangle. And I'm going to have to do this for every single last one. So most patterns, when they make them, they will make them a tad bit bigger than what you need the final piece to be. So then that way you can square it and get a nice even block, rather than hoping and praying that it's going to work out the way you want it to. So I have that little bit left over. That doesn't necessarily mean that every block is going to turn out that way. Every block could be different when I lay it out. It depends on what that seam looked like when I was sewing that seam allowance. Sometimes we think we're at a 1/4 inch, even with a 1/4 inch foot, and sometimes we're not. So I just need to go through and do all of these. I do make sure that everything is lined up, because if everything isn't lined up, it may throw off the diagonal line a little bit, and you don't want that to happen. I think I have 8 of these, so that means there's a total of 16 blocks that I need to square up. The rule is measure once, cut, okay, let me say that again. Measure twice, cut once. So I'm checking where my measurements are for this. And as soon as I know that I have that right and I've looked, then I'm cutting. Because if you cut and you only measure once, sometimes you're not paying attention to what you're doing. Ask me how I know. And then you will have the wrong size. And it's not the end of the world unless you don't have enough fabric. So this particular sampler will call for 2 jolly bars. So if you're using jolly bars, then you will end up with enough left over that you will be able to make some mistakes and still have enough pieces left over that you'll be able to swap out. And of course, I already messed up something from previously, and that's how I know. But I did go through when I laid everything out and I made sure I had what I needed. I did go through and lay everything out for all the blocks before I got started to ensure that I was going to have enough. And I did. So I'm not worried about making mistakes, but I don't try to make them either. Hey, Snuggler, how are you? Awesome. I am so happy. I'm always so happy to see fellow quilters when they come out to hang out with me. And I do try to check out the pages, see what you guys are quilting, to get some ideas and inspiration, especially when it comes to scraps. So I will be thinking about scrap activities, but I might do that for the month of October because I do have a lot of scraps. A lot of scraps. Okay, and you can see that this is, so I've already been through 2, 4, 7, 6. 6 of them so far, so there's not a lot that I should be shaving off. So a good pattern is not going to have you like wasting a whole lot of inches of fabric, because inches is money. Yeah, making sure those measurements are key. Are you doing a pattern or your own thing? So this is a pattern, and I'll show you the book in a second. So this is part of a sew along, sponsored by, or quilt along, sponsored by the Fat Quarter Shop, and it is called the Jolly Bar 5 quilt along. And so Fat Quarter Shop has a book, and it is called the Jolly Bar Volume 5. That's why it's the Jolly Bar 5 quilt along. And so in this book, there are 20 patterns. And each one of those patterns is made up of one of these 20 blocks. So we are taking 10 of these blocks and we are making a sampler quilt out of them. So the book can be found in my bio. You can get this from the Fat Quarter Shop. And like I said, for like only 10 smidgens of a, portion of our pay, we can have that, and we get 20 quilts out of it if we choose to use all of those blocks. But the great thing is that creating the sampler allows us to see if we really like those blocks or not. And again, for me, it's all like, I'm not a half square triangle person. And so to have to create a whole block out of half square triangles is not necessarily my favorite thing. I love the result. It's just the squaring up that is my least favorite part. But I do love how they turn out with the half square triangles. So what do I have? 6 more to go. Awesome. And so, but so this quilt along again is going to take us into December. So it's 1 block every 2 weeks that we are making, and then we start the next block. So there's plenty of time to join the quilt along. There's, time to get the pattern, and if you're like me, you could almost put this whole thing together in like a week. But I am following the directions because I do like to be a rule follower from time to time. Like I said, from time to time. So it's not all the time, but I will follow rules. So I am doing each one slowly but surely, taking my time. And then I said, well, if I slow myself down and commit myself to doing it on live, then that means that I can't rush. Okay, 4 more to go. Okay. And then it's just, there is another part technically that we could square, which will be the blocks after they're put together. And then we just have a big one that has to be square. Squaring up is a great thing. It is not the worst thing in the world, even though I don't like to do it. But I also don't like waves and wonkiness. And that's what will happen if you don't take the time to square up your quilt. So I find that my lines line up better. I find that things match up the way they're supposed to when I take the time to square up each of the parts. So while sometimes this is tedious and is something that I don't want to do, there is absolutely value in doing this. That's one of the reasons why we have a gazillion rulers, because those rulers help us to make the product look better in the end. And, if you don't square it up, it's not the end of the world. Just know that there may be some, what we like to call imperfections. And if the quilt police come for you, then ignore them. Because even with all this squaring up, I can't tell you that it would still come out perfect. Mistakes, again, we're human. Mistakes happen. Thank you. We are at 2,003. 2.3K. Thank you for tapping the screen. Again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you as we are making refractions. And so I am just going through down to the last 3. This is 2. This is 3. This is 2, and then 1. And the good thing is that, you know, like we're not making the whole quilt, right? So because we're not making the whole thing, I'm not sitting here because remember there were 9 blocks. So that would be 9 times what, 16? That would be how many half square triangles I would do. So traditionally, if I were doing the whole quilt, then I would be doing it in parts, and I might square up my triangles one day, or in one session I might put them together in units in another session. So I might not sit and do them all at once unless I'm watching some movie that has me totally engaged in the process, or if I'm at a sewing circle and it just makes sense because we're going through it and we're sitting there gossiping, and so it takes some of the monotony out of doing it, of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Okay, so we have all those done. And again, of all those blocks, this is all I have to show for it. So there's not a lot. I should not have a lot of waste. So it's just shaving off that little bit of extra, and then that was it. So now what we need to do is to start assembling this. Now, some of us forget from time to time what we're looking at. So again, I'll show you. This is refraction. So this is what this is going to look like. And we're going to work with it's a 4 patch that we're getting ready to do. Okay. So for that 4 patch, it is going to look and I keep forgetting which direction this is going to go with. Okay. Now I do want to make sure that when I'm doing this, that I'm setting everything up at one time. So this is 1, I need 4. And the reason for that is because there are opportunities for me to end up with the same blocks in the same set, and I don't want to do that. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, I'm setting them up so that I can see what they look like, and then if I need to adjust them, I can adjust them, because I don't want to have the same. I don't care if 2 blocks have the same half square triangles in them. What I care is that I don't want that 1 block to have the same half square triangles in them. So that's why it's important for me to set this up and pay attention to what I'm doing now than to do these one by one. Okay. So I should be good. Now I do need to pay attention the whole time that I'm going, but I should be good. And the key word is should. Again, welcome in everybody. Okay, so what I have here, we are working on a simple block tonight. So we are, almost halfway done. So what we need to do now is to make the 4 patches so that we can take those units and put it together to make the 1 block. Okay. No, this is called experience. Because when you've messed up, then yeah, you've learned from your mistakes. Because then you're like, oh my God, I got 2, and then you have the seam rip, and we try not to seam rip. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're making a 4 patch. So traditionally for 4 patches, we just roll one side over onto the other side and we stitch. Because we want to make sure all the units stay together, I'm going to do top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. That way the units will all stay together. And then I'm going to piece those as well. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to flip it over. Just because I'm right-handed, so it's easier for me to flip this way. You prefer to flip this way, that's fine. But I'm just going to take that first piece and flip it over. So from right to left, line everything up nice and neatly. I squared everything up so it should line up the way that it's supposed to. Take it to my machine and I'm going to stitch. If you feel some kind of way about back stitching, you can do a little back tack. I wouldn't do a big back tack because if something goes wrong, you got to pick that out. Okay, and then we'll pick the bottom one. Hey Wanda, how are you? Monica, how are you doing, darling? Welcome in everybody. This is what I have coined for my quilting journey. That's for the things that I need to get done. This is Fat Tuesday. So Tuesday is the day that I work on anything from the Fat Quarter Shop that I need done. I am working on the Jolly Bar 5 sampler and we are on block number 4. So block number 4 is called Refractions. It is part of the Jolly Bar, the Jolly Bar 5, Volume 5 book. You can find the link in my bio. It is in my link tree. And what I am doing now is assembling parts of the block. And so we're just putting those half square triangles together. We're lining them up and we are stitching a 1/4 inch. And it was interesting, we were talking about seam allowances. And typically in the quilting world, we use a 1/4 inch with quilts. If you feel some kind of way and you're using an 1/8 inch, just know that you don't have much of a seam when it comes to pulling, but it's not the end of the world. But the key to seams is being consistent. So if I'm using a 1/16, I better be using it all the way around, but it's also going to change the look and the size of what you do. So traditionally we use a 1/4 inch when we are sewing the pieces of the quilt block or the quilt together. Okay, and here we go with the last one. Making sure that I'm looking to see if there were any comments that I missed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate you for the heart me. Okay, sometimes that piece doesn't like to go underneath of my feed dog, underneath the foot into the feed dog. I'm going to play with it just a little bit, especially when those seams are right up at the top for those half square triangles. But just take your time. You don't have to rush. And you can make it work. Okay. So we have all of those halves put together. So we did side to side. So now we're coming back to do top to bottom. I am going to cut apart every 2, and I'll show you why. Hey Stitches, how are you doing? I told you I was coming out. Okay, so when I lay them back out again, they go right back into the order that they were in. And I can leave that stitch there because I can use it as a guide when I put this together. Okay. So I'm just relaying those out. And again, I prefer, I'm gonna do this. Oops, getting ready to cut the wrong one. Because if I messed up, because that can happen, I can catch it early. So I want to make sure that it looks the way it's supposed to look. And that if something's wrong, I'm catching it while I'm going. Okay? So everything still works in the way that it's supposed to go. Now, I could take this and let me go back for a second. Remember, we went from side to side. I could just take this and lay it from top to bottom. Take my seams and line them up. I press my seams in opposite directions. And I could stitch over this without pressing them, because it's going right over here. Thank you for the roses. And I don't have to press them. It's personal preference. As you get more comfortable with doing this, you'll find that this is a step that you could avoid. I'm not saying that a new person should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that if you're gonna leave those seams closed and you're not opening them up, you absolutely could nest them. This is what that's called. I'm using my fingers to make sure that those seams are butting up against each other. I'm going to use a clip to hold it in place. And then I can start from the end, take it to my machine, and then press. And then stitch. Again, this is personal preference for you if you prefer to do it this way or if you prefer to press them first. I don't press them open all the time, and so because I don't press them open all the time, then I prefer to nest and I'll take my chances. If you don't want to take your chances, let me just check real quick. Hey Karen, how are you doing? Oh, have a good one. Have a good night's rest. This is a Husqvarna Viking. This is Emerald. This has been my rider for about 10 years, 10, 20 years now. It's been at least 20 years. Okay. So I could take this, open it up, and I could press the seam flat. So again, I'll show you the way that I do it, and I show you the way that technically you're supposed to do it, but this is up to you. What this does is, of course, it lays your seams flat. I'm gonna have to press this anyway. I'm gonna have to go back and press that one. But I pressed my seam this way for this one, and I pressed it this way for this one. So that way, now when I lay them together, the seam is going in this direction on this one, and it's going in this direction on this one. So it's going this way, and one's going this way. That's what helps to nest them together. And again, I take my fingers and I'm kind of mushing it a little bit to get them to lay there. And again, with all of that, there are times when they don't nest the way that they're supposed to. And that's okay, because they're going to be close. And if they're close, nobody is going to be able to see that it wasn't 100% perfect. And we'll take a look at it. I'll show you what they look like once I finish the fourth one. when I get to that center seam, I do take my time to go over it to make sure that it's right. Remember my units, I didn't cut that chain, so they're coming up together. Pushing one seam in one direction, pushing the other one in the other, and I can press. So this is totally up to you. Stitches is always good for reminding everyone to tap the screen. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And then again, line those seams up. And you can feel it. You can kind of feel when they lock. I use that clip. I very rarely use pins, so I like the clips better. Pins stick my fingers, clips don't. Line everything up. And I got one more to go. So again, this is an easy and quick block to put together, and it's just a series of 4 patches. That's all it is. Okay, and we're gonna press that last one. So again, and I remember I've got to go back and press that first one because I didn't press it. But again, this is personal preference. There are people who I would not suggest going too far down the rabbit hole without pressing things, because then it's harder to press it when you have a lot. So it's easier to press as you go. But like I said, there's nothing wrong with, at this point, not pressing it. It's not the end of the world. But I wouldn't have so many blocks and then I not pressed any of those blocks and then I begin to put them all together, because it'll be harder to get everything nice and flat. And it also, if something's not lined up the way that it's supposed to be, you'll probably end up doing a lot more seam ripping. And I try to avoid seam ripping at all costs. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but I think it would happen more if I wasn't paying attention. Okay, so I have these 4. The first one is the one that I didn't press, so I do have to go back and press it. My seams are going in the directions that I want them to go in. And it just takes a little bit more effort, but absolutely I can still press those seams. Just need to make sure that's going in the right direction. Okay. Now I did tell you that what I don't do is I don't press, hey Miss Janine, I don't press my seams open a lot of times, but sometimes I do. Again, personal preference for you, which way you decide to go. These seams are going, this one's going this way, this seam is going this way. I can now take these and take my fingers and kind of push those seams in the direction they'll go in, and it almost gives me like a pinwheel. But I could choose to press those open. Again, personal preference, what you want to do. And then in the center, I left that one little piece in there, and that's what, there it is. It's not giving me what I wanted to give. And so all of that will lay flat. And then you can see, other than the fact that I could press a little bit more, that did line up exactly the way it was supposed to. So this was the one, right? I'm gonna just give this a little bit of spray. This was the one that I did without pressing it first. So again, it will work. Okay. Look, I'm not, and again, I'm not mad at you, and I'm not saying that you have to, because there are quilts where none of the lines match up, and if none of the lines match up, that's even less pressing I'm going to do. So I wouldn't sit here and tell you that I always press everything, because I don't. And that's why I'll give it both ways, because sometimes I'll be on live and somebody will say, aren't you going to? Nope. No, no ma'am. No sir. Remember, I had those two pieces together. They were still chained together, so that's why I need to just snip that piece, because what'll happen is I can loosen up some of the threads in here, and that's what helps to let this lay flat. And part of this isn't working the way that I want it to, because I back stitched, but that's fine. And again, I just press. Ooh, felt like it got dark in here all of a sudden for some reason. I had to look up. You want to do more pressing than you want to do ironing. Pressing is just kind of laying this on the fabric. That's right. Less work works better. That's what I'm talking about. I thought it got dark for a minute, for a second. Okay, let me push the puzzle piece. Got it, first try. And again, you can see that it lined up. Now, will I get 4 for 4? We're gonna find out. Because so far I have 2 for 2. And again, we can just pop those open. And then we can just press these to get them to go like a little pinwheel. Okay. Oops. Then we'll turn this over. Give it a little squirt. You don't need a lot of spray starch. Like, this is just to kind of help train the fabric. This is not to saturate your fabric. This is just to help it, just to get it to lay flat. And that's a little, like, it's there, but I can see it just a little hair off. But that's fine. Because again, nobody is going to see that gets it. Nobody's inspecting that close. We are not in the show. And so whatever lucky relative or friend gets this quilt is not going to be sitting there worrying about, oh, look at that, it's a hair off in the center. Now, if I were giving this to a quilter, not that the quilter is going to look that close either, but like, they would be the ones, right? So they would be the ones that would look that close, but nobody else would. Hello, Cinder Shelley. How are you? Welcome. It is so nice to meet you. Thank you. These blocks are getting ready to get sewn together into one big block. So we're getting ready to do another 4-patch. Okay. And again, just because I'm showing you the right way is the only reason why I'm doing some of these steps. Okay. So we had, was this the last one? Just so you could see. that those corners lined up. Okay. Underneath my table is my big square. That's not it. Let's try again. Okay. So what I do need to do is just to make sure that these squares, if I have the square turned around right, okay, measure what they're supposed to measure for the final block. And it looks like miraculously, I don't have to do any trimming. Absolutely. Come to the dark side. Okay. And we're just going to try the last one just to make sure. If it's a little off, I'm not worried about it. I'm worried about it if it's a lot off. Okay. So as long as it's not a lot off, I'm good. Okay. So again, okay. We're going to lay this out. We're going to look and see if this works for us. And we're going to play around with those blocks until it works the way that we want it to work. And I moved some things around because I felt like I had these two, they were on the same side, and I felt like two were connecting. So now that I'm looking at it, this looks the way that I think it should go. A little off, is like less than a 1/16 of an inch for me. I mean, you could like see it wasn't perfect, but if it's like a 1/4 inch off, like it's gonna look a little jagged, and that's a lot off for me. An 1/8 of an inch, depending on the colors. If it's not too much contrast, I might leave that alone too. It just depends on the fabrics, on what I consider to be a little and what somebody else might consider to be a little. So each person may say something's a little off based off of their own personal preference. So for me, it's like a hair is a little bit off, but again, this is contrasted light to light and dark. So sometimes that light will show off a little off a lot more than two darks sitting next to each other. Okay, so we have 4 of these, so it's still a 4-patch. So we're going to join them together the same way we did when we made each one of these units. We're going to flip these over, and then we're going to stitch these together, and then we're going to stitch the final piece together, and then we will be done. Okay, so again, I'm going to line these up. I'm going to put my center together, nest them, and clip. Line up those corners, take it to my machine. If you're talking about a little off for the squares themselves, it's the same thing. If it is, like if it's a 1/4 off, it's going to make a big difference. So you don't want your blocks to be a 1/4 off. Even a 16th, like like an 1/8 or a 16th isn't bad, because you could do a little less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance and still capture it to make it work. But a 1/4 inch off is really going to make a difference. So when you're putting those blocks together, you want them to be as close to the same size as you can possibly get them. Like I said, if they're a little off, you can kind of fudge it, because you can tug on the fabric a little bit and it'll help ease it in, and it won't matter too much. But if you have to do a whole lot of tugging, you're going to start to get waves and ripples. So sometimes, sometimes when I'm squaring the blocks up, if I notice that it's a little bit off, I'm gonna make note of the fact that it's a little bit off. And then when I take them and I sew them together, I'll give it what we might call like a scant 1/4 inch. That's a little less than a 1/4 inch. Or I might do like a 1/8 inch. Okay. And so what I mean by that is your seam, which is really hard to see here, but this is an 1/8 inch seam. This is the only space between my fingernails that I have. So if I have to go less than that, I don't have a lot of room to work with. So if I cut a 1/4 in half, I have an 1/8. There's not a whole lot of seam allowance here. So I need these to be as close as I possibly can. And that's one of the reasons why it's also important to square up your blocks, so that you will have it as close as you can possibly get it. Again, we open it up, make sure everything works the way we want it to work. Again, you can press it, or you don't have to, because you're only capturing those little pieces. But we'll press it. I'm going to press one in one direction, press the other in the other. But if you feel some kind of way, you could absolutely open these seams up. And I'll show you why. Because right here, this corner, this seam, this seam, this seam, this seam, this seam, and this seam, all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these seams are all meeting in the middle. So sometimes it helps with this one to kind of open it up and to press it flat, because then you won't have this big bump right here in the center, because it will get bulky right there, and it's going to be on one side, which is going to make that one side a little bit bulkier. So sometimes, because of all that meeting, we'll open it up and press it. Okay, if I feel some kind of way, I'll hit it with a little bit of starch, and then I'll press that again. For a beginner, it depends on how ambitious you are. If you are extremely ambitious, then there are a lot of different patterns that you could use that would work for you. If you are not that ambitious and you want to keep it easy, I stick with like patchwork type quilts that just have like squares and rectangles, because I just think like you don't have to worry. They're a little bit more forgiving than one like, let's say this one, where you're dealing with half square triangles. But it depends. So I would definitely do a search for beginner patterns. The bigger the block, I think the easier it is. So even if you're dealing with half square triangles, you could find a cute quilt block that has half square triangles, but those half square triangle units are going to be like 8 inches. And so they're a little bit easier to work with than one that is smaller. No, I have never burned my fabric. I usually don't leave it down there long enough to burn it. Have I burned something on my iron and then transferred it to the fabric? Yes. Because if I'm not paying attention, then I absolutely will like iron a piece of plastic, and then the plastic is on there, and then I put it on my fabric. I also, these feet are off right now, but with the Lisso iron, it has feet so that if I let it go, it'll come up off the ironing board. It does have automatic shut off, and so it will keep me from leaving it somewhere where I run the risk of getting it scorching something. This has eye touch, which means that every time I touch this, the feet go down. I turn that off because if I don't need it, then I don't have to worry about the feet. And I'll let it sit there for a second just because it helps to lay that a little bit flatter. Okay. But again, that's just me. But I've never burnt cotton. I've scorched other fabrics that are a little bit more scorchable than cotton, but I've never burned cotton. So again, I would look for the patterns, look for a free pattern, read the directions. You can see would this work? I think that these Jolly bars these patterns to me are easy enough. Until I get to Scattered next week, and then I might have a different opinion because there's a whole bunch more half square triangles than there are in this one. But like I said, the smaller the pieces, I think the harder it is, because then it plays tricks on your eyes for me. I clipped all of the seams. I lined them all up. I clipped them so that they're all in place. And then I can line up my edges, and I'll take this to my machine for the final stitch. So the long arm isn't needed until you are stitching everything together, and you don't need a long arm. So this Husqvarna Viking Emerald I've had for 20 years, and I just got the long arm last year. So how was I putting my quilts together before the long arm? I use my domestic. So you don't need to use a long arm. It makes things easier. It's like making a cake, right? Like you could mix that cake batter by hand. But if you use a mixer, it's going to go a lot faster. And if you use one of those stand mixers, it's going to go even faster than that, right? So there is convenience more than anything. But you can absolutely do it without a long arm. It's stuck there. Okay, I got it. So I'll show you some pieces that I have sitting right next to my machine in a second. So if I am stitching my quilt together, all the pieces together, which is a quilt sandwich, then I can use the stitches that are available to me on my domestic that I could also do on my long arm. So we'll open this up in a second, but let me show you. So this is just strips all sewn together, right? In this light, it looks like they were all one, but these are the strips sewn together. All I did was, and this doesn't have the backing on it because I was going to do something with it, I just did some swirls. I did these on my domestic machine because why turn on the long arm for this small piece? So this was just something simple, some simple swirls. I have a foot that works for this, and I can do this on my machine. So this is the quilt top, similar to what I'm doing here. and batting. Or I can look at another piece. So this is when we quilt, right? These are scraps. And all I did was stitch everything together. Then I took this again to my machine. This is not done on the long arm. And you can't see it because of all these wonderful masks that are on here, but if I come in close, you can see those lines. So all I did was stitch lines. I stitched in what they call the ditch along each of these lines. That's all I did. And that was it. So I quilted this whole thing without a long arm. I did it on my domestic machine, and I used a walking foot. So the walking foot has feed dogs underneath of it. So they're like teeth, right? And so they're teeth on your machine that helps to move your fabric along. When you have a quilt top, you have the backing, inside of this, the batting, and then the quilt top. So this helps to move the quilt top at the same rate that your machine is moving the backing. So it helps to evenly feed through. So they used to call it an even feed foot, but we call it a walking foot. So the walking foot is what I would use on my domestic machine. So I can absolutely quilt anything on my domestic machine without using a long arm. Now, this is what we call the throat. This throat isn't that wide. So that means that when my fabric is going through here, at some point, it's going to bunch up underneath of the throat. And depending on how big that quilt is and how thick that batting is, it's going to be a chore. I've done all the way up to a queen size. It can be done, but it's going to be a chore. You'll have some muscles when you finish, but it can be done. So a long arm has a wider throat. The long arm would have, like, if this is from the needle to the edge, this is about 6 inches. My long arm is 16. So it just gives me more room to work, and it's just easier to get up in there to do what I need to do. This I don't have as much, and it's higher too. So it's higher and it's wider. So that's the difference between that. Let me see. So, and again, you can do it. Can you use any walking foot? So I would check the machines, because no, there are certain machines that are low shank, high shank, so they require a different walking foot. So you need to know what kind of machine you have, or when you look it up, look in the description and see if it's for that particular machine. Sometimes they will sell walking feet for Husqvarna Vikings. They cost more, so we don't buy those. Or you can get the off-brand one and just know that it's one for, like for me, there's one for my Emerald and there's also one for my Opal. Both are Husqvarna Vikings, but they have 2 different types of feet. So you just need to know which kind you need. And let me get back to my block in 1 second. Of course I can't. I know I'm not going to be able to put my hands on it just because I want it. I see it. And the other foot that you could get is this foot. And so this is a quilting foot. It's an open toe foot, or this is closed toe. This one is a closed toe. And it has a spring, so it just bounces around on your fabric. It's a free motion quilt foot, they'll call it. There's like a billion different names, but that's what allows you to get like the swirls and the twirls and everything else. So the walking foot is mainly used for straight lines. You could use a special stitch to do that straight line, but it's just usually used for straight lines. For the meandering, the open toe, the whatever, you know, foot they want to call it, that foot you can lower your feed dogs and do any sort of design with that. But again, those are both for your domestic machine, and they will work perfect on your domestic machine. Yeah, I had a walking foot that finally, unfortunately, had to put in the trash. And I had to buy another walking foot for this machine. But that walking foot has seen some wonderful days, and it deserved to be retired. Okay. So we open this up. And we're going to press that final one. Yes, I love my Viking. April, thank you for becoming a member of the fan club. I love my Vikings. This is, so again, I have Emerald. I have Opal. So Emerald is a manual machine. Opal has digital features, computerized. I have Ruby. Ruby is my, why am I drawing a blank? Embroidery machine, but I can use that to quilt and sew as well. I can use Amber. Amber is my serger. So I have a total of 4 Husqvarna Viking machines. Amber is my serger. So I have a total of 4 Husqvarna Viking machines. My thing is, it's like people are like, oh, you need, and I'm like, here's the thing. The Vikings are so, like, my Vikings have been so good to me that I haven't needed to purchase another machine. So that, like, there's no need for me. Like, it's not like, oh, this one isn't working anymore and it doesn't do what I needed to do. No, my machines have been working. So there's no need for me to get another one. So I'm good with my Vikings. They have done well by me, and until they don't, you know, we'll cross that bridge when I get there. And there's no need to buy a new one because I have just about everything I need. And if I wanted to change my Bernina right now, it's a sit down, it's on a table. I could change the Bernina and get a frame for it, and then have a little bit more room with the frame. Okay, so here we go. And here is the Refractions block. Okay. So Refractions is done. This is the 4th block. The fabric that I'm using is called Denim and Daisies. It is part of the Jolly Bar collection. They come in other things other than just Jolly Bars, but the collection itself is Denim and Daisies. And so again, here is the Jolly Bar book. So this Jolly Bar book has, and then they say 20 Jolly Bar quilts. You can make 20 of them because there are 20 different blocks. And while I can't show you everything here, I can show you the table of contents. So these are all of the blocks. So to date, we have made hatchlings. Yeah, there goes my finger right there. So we've done that. We've done the Holly Berry. This one right here, we did Northern Lights 2 weeks ago, and then Refractions today. So the next block, and you can see all them little tiny pieces, but this is a big block. It's a really big block, but these are all the tiny pieces because it's a big block, but they're the same size as all of these, so the pieces aren't that tiny. But this is the next one that we will be working on, so we will be making the Scattered Stars quilt block next week, 2 weeks, in 2 weeks. So that will be on 10/8. So we take next week off in terms of making the blocks, but I will be cutting everything out for them, and I will be posting what I cut out, and then we will be making the block the following week. So you can get this book from the Fat Quarter Shop. The link is in my bio. It is in my link tree. It's right in my bio. But this comes from the Fat Quarter Shop. The Sew Along is also sponsored by the Fat Quarter Shop. Denim and Daisies is in the Fat Quarter Shop. You don't have to buy Denim and Daisies. You could absolutely use scraps. The Sew Along is going through to December, so there is plenty of time. This is only block 4 out of 10 blocks that we are making, so there's still time to catch up. All of my videos that I have done for this are on YouTube. So I do post them on YouTube. The same way you hear it here is the same way it is on YouTube. I do not edit. So they're on YouTube. So if you need to go back to follow them to do those blocks, you can absolutely do them from there. I try to post them by Wednesday. So I will post the directions for the block. Not the directions. I will post the requirements for what you need for each of them to do just the single block, because the pattern will tell you how to do the whole quilt. And so I did some math, which is why I have these little tabs here before I realized that they had already given me that information. And so I went ahead and just did it that way. So all the information I'll have posted tomorrow. I will have this picture posted tomorrow. I'll have the video posted in YouTube. That link is also in my bio. The book is in my bio. Denim and Daisies is in my bio. Everything is from the Fat Quarter Shop. And so if you want to follow along, even if you just say, you know what, I like this block and I want to make 8 more like it and just make a quilt from it, knock yourself out. So you can absolutely do that. But the sampler is a great way to learn how to make different blocks and then put them all together to create a quilt, rather than just making the standard one that's here. This is only about 10 bucks, so it's a great price for 20 patterns. So if you're interested in getting it, please check the link out. But thank you everyone for joining me this evening. I appreciate you. I appreciate you for tapping the screen. We are almost at 7,000. 6.3K, so I do thank you for that. Thank you for those of you that gave roses, the heart me's, who were a part of the fan club, and for those of you who talked to me along the way, because it does make it a lot more interesting and easy when folks talk to me. So I thank you for that. But again, we're at the Jolly Bar 5 Quilt Along, sponsored by the Fat Quarter Shop. I do post everything, and they are in my videos here. So please make sure you are following me here on TikTok. Make sure that you follow me also on YouTube to get that information as well if you need it there. Make sure you're up in the link tree for the book. And you'll see me in 2 weeks for the next block that we will be making. But of course, I will be live doing other things. So I have some other projects that I do need to work on, and I will be posting those videos in my quest this month to post every day. So I do have a video that I need to post before the end of the night, before I forget I'm going to work in the morning. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great evening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and happy quilting.